I'm a little bit tired of people saying that our education system is broken without actually suggesting any ideas on how to fix it or giving any constructive criticism about how it could be made better. So I want to do a little digging. It's unlikely that I'll find anything useful, but I want to see what options are even out there because there's got to be something, right? Okay, before we dive in though, a little about me. A little about me. I am currently working as a substitute teacher, so I have no experience dealing with the school system as a whole, like all the politics and like actually teaching and doing all the regular teacher stuff. But I see a lot of classrooms and I see a lot of students in the classrooms and I talk to a fair amount of teachers. So I have like a little bit of an understanding of what goes on in the schools. And a few things that I know whatever alternative schooling system is going to have to deal with is like the sheer number of students is a big problem. There are an insane number of students that go to the schools. I don't know if most people realize, but each school has like a lot of students. I live in a small town and there are 3 high schools, but there are probably somewhere around 5,000 high school students in my small town alone. And that is a lot of people. And that's not counting elementary schools and middle schools. So whatever system you put in place or whatever like changes you make to the system are going to have to deal with like a massive number of human bodies. The other thing is that it's going to have to deal with the standardization of education. And that means you got to find a way to make sure that everybody at least knows the basic. And that may sound simple, but if you have ever tried to teach a child something, you will know it's not that straightforward. I'm mainly going to be covering K through 12 in this video. I know when a lot of people are talking about the education system, they're talking about upper level learning or higher learning. Topic is also important, but I'm mainly going to be dealing with K through 12 here. So let's look into it. What systems are being put in place to change education? Also, the big complaint I hear a lot of the time is like how our education system is built to train students to work in factories. Give me another system that would deal with this number of people. I dare you. This is what I want to know. What other system would deal with this quantity of children? I'm almost 100% positive that in looking into this topic, I'm going to get a lot of BS and fluff and people who just want to keep saying the party line but have no real solutions to the problem. And I'm going to do my best to figure out to get past all that. Like there's so much of this BS. Our mission is to empower all students with the tools, system, knowledge, and mindset to prepare them fully to participate in the global economy and robust democracy. But like, how though? Like, how? We must learn to act in new ways, new designs to advance learning, pathways to post-secondary success. Yeah, it's just a bunch of bullshit. Just fluffy, like, let's reform with no actual, like, practical methods to actually change anything. You can read this conclusion if you want on your own, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. Let's change things together. How, though? Okay, I'm getting a little too worked up. I think I might need to take a different tack. Let's change the approach. Let's try and define what that factory working schedule actually is. Okay, Wikipedia is saying the factory model. Let's just Google that and see what comes up. Okay, this seems to be an accepted term. Let's see if we can find a different one. Alternatives to the factory model school. So there's some different options here. Let me just ask one more question. Proposed alternatives to the factory model school. Because I feel like with all this hubbub and like bluster and everybody's angry about it, somebody must have proposed a solution, right? Am I crazy? Somebody must be talking about ways we can change things, right? Okay, she's going to provide evidence about how the multicultural education is better. I feel like also one of the problems is that we're not going to find a system that deals with this number of students that like effectively changes the way things are done. There's just going to be minor improvements made to the way things are taught, maybe. But I mean, if you look at countries like Finland, so even if you look at like these countries that are doing really well, I think Finland is the one that is mainly like touted as like the golden standard because they have super small class sizes. The teachers are paid really well. Like these other countries like Hong Kong and Korea and China are doing better on test scores, but it's because they put their children through hell to get there. But Finland is the one where Estonia, I haven't heard about Estonia doing well, but they've got all the like classical good things about education, but I'm pretty sure that they still go by the factory standard model. So I don't think any changes to education in the States is going to be driven by like changes to the norm. It's going to be like very small and incremental and minor changes, but you never know. So homeschooling is an option. Forest school, what's that? I think most people know what homeschooling is. Let's look into forest schools. Okay, it's like a forest schools are like a field trip thing. Take kids out into nature and let them learn there, which might work for homeschool kids, not for thousands of students at a time. Micro schools. I hate you, education people. He's like, let's define what it is, and then proceeds to not define what it is at all. Okay, it seems like a micro school is just a smaller, like they deliberately kept the school size small. It seems like they're mainly just supporting homeschool students and giving them like a location to meet. Okay, I'm gonna put this down as an option because this actually seems pretty decent. I want to look into this more. Montessori. So I've actually heard about Montessori schools before, and they seem legit. They prioritize self-directed activity, hands-on learning, and collaborative play. Basically, they're like the kid does everything. The kid like makes their own meals. They like wash their own clothes. They do all of like the normal everyday stuff, and it's based around the child learning. They basically just turn the classroom into like a house, and then the kids just do things around the house. And also, there's some learning thrown in there as well. I've never heard of a Montessori school going past like second grade or third grade. I don't know how high they go, but it's usually very low. Also, I don't know how well it would scale. How well would they be able to deal with a crap ton of students? I don't know. Waldorf education. Okay, so another thing you need to address is like it's all well and great to have the intention to give your students practical skills, but your students also like as a society, we need kids who are like well versed in certain things, at least the basics. And if the only focus is put on learning practical skills, then we're going to have a nation of people who are not well informed. It's kind of the problem. I think we're already running into that problem, but just something to think about. Okay, this seems like it might be kind of a cool idea. Educational style is holistic and intended to develop people's intellectual, artistic, and practical skills with a focus on imagination and creativity. So I've heard about these schools, and it seems like they usually turn out very good artists and creative thinkers, but a lot of the time they have difficulty holding down real jobs, and they end up being entrepreneurs, which is like awesome. But I think most people are kind of sheep-esque, herd-esque. Most people are not. If we had a whole nation of entrepreneurs, would that be a good thing? I don't know, actually. Maybe. Put this down for later. I mean, unschooling seems like a kind of a cool thought. I think there's more behind it than this. Let me look further. So I think the basis for unschooling is that like it's child driven. So whatever the child is interested in, let them learn. I think I guess a lot of people confuse unschooling with homeschooling, which they're not the same. Everybody knows this, that the problem with letting the child choose is most children will not choose to educate themselves if they have the option. So the catch here is that you need someone who is driven to kind of guide the child or the children. Freaking massive amounts of children. This would require basically every parent, or I don't know who's teaching these children, who is kind of corralling them and like watching them throughout the day. It's an interesting concept. I'll look into it more, but probably not that practical. All right, that's all the time I have for this morning. I'm going to look into these more and get back to you. I'm back, but I didn't learn that much. I want to do a quick update on what I've been learning so that I can start fresh tomorrow and learn some more and kind of reset a little bit because I got distracted and I learned some things. Okay, so these were some options for different schooling things, but like the problem with these is that they're basically all like micro schools, just like variations of micro schools, not the distance learning. I didn't really look into that because I feel like it's self-explanatory enough, and what is like absolutely never going to be able to work with the quantity of children. I think that's like the main problem with micro schools is that they might be like a nice alternative to a regular school, but they're never going to be able to deal with the quantity of students. Which, if you're wondering, in my small town, there are around 24,000 students just in my area, and in the Sacramento area, Sacramento, California area, close to where I live, there are 253,000 students enrolled in that school district, which is an insane number of just students. Anyways, so these are the numbers we're dealing with. So the Acton Academy, I looked into this one because it was kind of interesting sounding. You can look into them more if you want to. If you want to pause the video and look at my notes here. It's like kind of a cool idea, but also not really super worth looking into because it's not going to solve any problems. The most interesting part about this that I found was that they have the ages lumped together. So they have K through 6 together, middle school together, and high school together. So there's no real like grades. It's just like kind of everybody's learning at the same time with their like lump of people. Also, there's only like anywhere from like 6 to like 30 students in the school. The problem with these micro schools, I think, and all of like these like super student centered approaches is that like you can either have who is pushing these students to learn things, because it's one thing to be like, we want the students to learn and we want them to grow on their own and we want them to want to learn, so that when they it's actually so that they're like doing the learning on their own and they're not being forced to, which is awesome, sure. But there are 90% of students are not going to push themselves to learn things unless somebody else is like physically or actively pushing them into it. So that's my main problem with these schools. A, they're kind of only a novelty thing. They're never going to be able to like change the system. And B, are they actually going to be, they seem like they're only useful for students who are going to end up being driven anyways, who would have excelled in a regular education system anyways. They're not going to be a good fit for every student. I was kind of wanting to know how schools like this turn out, but this one, the Acton Academy, is only 9 years old. There's like 100 different locations, but it was only founded 9 years ago, so there's really not enough data to know. If you're wondering where I got the number of students, it was listed on this website here, eddata.org. So I was kind of struggling a little bit to all of these micro schools. It's like they're kind of interesting, but they're not really worth detailing because all of them are basically the same. We want the students to run their own journey. We want small school sizes and whatnot. So I wasn't really feeling like I needed to look into that much more. So I thought maybe I'll just like try and find a list of like what are all the problems in the States, like what problems are facing teachers and students right now. And the first one that I ran into was underfunding, which like I'm sure you've heard everybody says, oh, schools are underfunded. So I was like, what does that actually mean? What does it mean to be underfunded? Website article was saying that there's a high student to teacher ratio, which is like there are a lot of students and not that many teachers, which I think most people already know. And then this website was like, sounded promising. It's more complex than you think. It started giving stuff that made it seem like, oh, maybe it is more complex than you think. And they actually cited their sources, which was kind of nice. They left links to their sources, which I appreciate. But then I was like looking at these sources and I was like, you know what? This is an incredibly complex topic. And if I am going into this thing feeling like it should be a certain way, there are so many opinions out there and so much evidence to back up every single opinion that it does not matter which approach I take. There's going to be evidence to back up that approach, and there are going to be people saying that this is the correct way or this is the thing wrong. So I was like, I'm not going to be able to find an answer. So I had to change tack again a little bit. So I kind of puttered around a little bit. And then I realized that the Waldorf school style is not actually as much of a micro school style. I mean, apparently there's a lot of Waldorf style schools around in the world. Apparently it's pretty popular and they do things a little bit differently. They usually start off the day with like some physical movement. They have a 2-hour block schedule that is like devoted to one topic. And so they do that 2 hours on that one topic every day for a month. And then at the end of the month, they change to a new topic. So if they're studying like geology, they'll do 2 hours every day on geology. And then at the end of the month, they'll switch to something else like engineering or something. I don't know, which I thought was kind of cool. And then they switched to an elective type class. I didn't really get to look into this much, but I think they're doing basically the same. I think like the bell schedules. Yeah, I don't know. This one actually sounds intriguing, but once again, I don't know that it would be able to handle the number of students. I'm not sure. I need to look into this more. And I just, like right before I started recording, I found this article that was talking about like the history of the factory model of education and how before it there was something called the Lancaster-Bell Model, which sounded kind of cool, but I need to verify how accurate this is because this is just a random website. So I'm going to look into this more and then I will get back to you in the morning about some more of this stuff.
It's the morning. Can you tell I just woke up not that long ago? Okay, I want to know more about this Lancaster-Bell model. I guess it's also called the Monitorial System. Okay, just as a cursory understanding, it says the method was based on the abler pupils being used as helpers to the teacher, passing on the information they learned to other students. I actually really can get on board with this because I feel like I think it's Maslow's hierarchy of learning where it's like the different levels of learning is like you can memorize things and just repeat it. You can use that information in like a useful setting, or you can teach it to someone. And if you're teaching it to someone, that means you understand it to the best. And I think if you have students who are like 2 or 3 years older teaching concepts to younger students, then that would really like cement the learning in the older students' brains, and then they can like actually have a foundation in the basics so that they can build on that with other skills. I think that makes a lot of sense. So this is actually interesting, and they're actually saying that the monitorial system made a lot of progress because it was cheap and because you could actually add more students because you could have the older students helping out the younger ones and the teachers didn't have to do as much. So that would work super great with like quantity management, but the problem is rigor, academic rigor. Okay, another pretty big question about this is like, would it work if the students did not want to teach the younger students? If they were not willing to cooperate, would this work? Because there's a lot of students in the schools right now who will just put their heads down and sleep and not do anything and will not try at all. So I think that's mainly high school. It's confusing when you think about the difference between elementary school and middle school and high school, because elementary school kids are one thing, but then high schoolers are like a completely separate category. I feel like we should probably not be lumping them in together. Whatever changes should probably be made separately to elementary school, middle school, and high school. Because you could absolutely do something like this to elementary school kids with elementary school kids when they're young and they're more susceptible, they're more impressionable, and they're willing to do things that high schoolers are not willing to do. This topic is hard because there's so much fluff and people just BSing their way through their explanations. So I don't know how trustworthy this website is, but they make a good point. There's no guarantee that participants will see the project through to the end and achieve the desired results. If you have students teaching students, there's no guarantee that you're actually going to get a student who is taught. These poor kids, they look so tired and sad, beaten into submission. I really need to like find something specific I can drill down into because this topic is so... I picked too broad of a topic, okay? I feel like the peer-to-peer model is worth looking into. I don't have time to keep looking into it this morning, but if you're interested and you would like to look into it more, I feel like especially for elementary school, because you can definitely get elementary school kids to work together. Like if you were to build a foundation of like this is what we do in school and do peer-to-peer learning, or even like fourth grade to first grade learning, and then kind of just build that up, it might be able to translate to middle school and high school. Definitely, I feel like would be a viable option in elementary school, which I personally kind of feel like is necessary because you got to get the foundations. Like if you get kids in 8th grade who can't read, their high school years are not going to turn out well. Got to get those foundations in, even if it takes a while. Let's see. Okay, let's look back at the Waldorf style because I want to know if they have like how many students they have. Is it another micro school thing? I keep hearing people talk about how children are taught a traditional phonics approach in like these non-traditional schools. Like how are they teaching them in the regular schools? I thought phonics was what everybody learned. What is the style of teaching to read called now? It's hard to find trustworthy sources in this topic. This is very true. A shocking number of kids in the US can't read very well. I think most people know this. A third of all 4th graders can't read at a basic level. She's calling the way that students learn in the US today is 3Qing. 3Qing, which is, teachers maybe know it as MSV. M stands for meaning, S for sentence structure, and V for using visual information. I don't know that, I haven't observed this in classes. So basically just teaching the students to like memorize words, and then if they don't recognize the word, to kind of guess it from context based on the sentence or like how the word looks. I don't know about this. I almost don't want to write this stuff down because I don't know how reliable this source is. Sounding out, a better way to teach reading. Little girl tapped the letters of the word with her finger and then said pig with a big smile. Like, is this not, I thought they were already doing this. Like, I've definitely observed, in this one, she's talking about how they, like, teachers will have the students associate a letter with a picture and then maybe also a word with a picture, which I've definitely observed them, like, using a lot of pictures in kindergarten and, like, teaching, using images a lot, but I didn't think they were, like, teaching them whole words that way. This article was posted 3 years ago. I just want to know what the system they're using now is. Whole language. Whole language versus structured language. So this image is accurate. I have seen a lot of this type of stuff in the classrooms. I don't know about these things specifically. Wait, no I haven't. Not with these V's. This is a weird picture. What? No way. This says whole word methodology teaches students to recognize words as wholes through repeated exposure. That makes no sense. Like, I've definitely seen them asked to memorize lists of sight words, but it's usually like a list of like 50 to 80 words is on the list. This sounds made up. Are they actually? There's no way they're actually doing this. Side quest acquired. I'm gonna look into this. I'm gonna figure out how they're actually teaching students to read in the schools, and I will get back to you later. So I'm not gonna lie,
I completely forgot that I was researching the Waldorf method and got just turned on to how kids learn to read. So if you were hoping I was going to finish my thoughts on the Waldorf method, you are going to be disappointed. Sorry. So I tried to narrow in my focus and decide like what method are they actually using in schools to teach right now. If they're not using the phonics method, like what method are they actually using? So I know I've said this a bunch of times, but it's really hard to find reliable sources. So this article also is citing the whole language movement as the like source of all the problems. But they did turn me on to the balanced literacy approach, which I started looking into. So I wanted to know like why can the internet tell me why students in schools can't read? Because everybody always says nobody can read in schools anymore. Not nobody, but there's a lot of students in schools who either can't read or whose reading proficiency levels are like way below what they should be. So I looked at this. Many kids can't read even in high school. Is a solution teaching reading in every class? My personal opinion? Hell no. If you can't read by high school, it is not the biology teacher's job to teach you how to read. We are way past that at that point. Some serious intervention needs to be taken. But this article was mainly just going into like, should teachers be teaching reading skills? Should be taking like 20 minutes out of every class to teach students reading skills? Like, should the math teacher be teaching reading? Should the biology teacher be teaching reading? But I want to know, like, is it that they can't read at all? Like, are these students not capable of reading? Or is it just that their reading comprehension is really low? Or that they can read, they just can't read things quickly enough to like do things in a timely manner in the classroom? So this article did turn me on to this nation's report card. And it also turned me on to this, like highlights of the nation's report card. Okay, so this is saying that in that nation's report card, more than nearly 70% of 8th graders scored below proficient, and of those 70%, 30% scored below basic. So it's not that they can't read to the required levels, which is a problem, admittedly. But I was looking at this, and this is the highlights, and what I took away from this is that reading scores have just been real bad for a long time. This is 1992, and then 2003, and then 2019, and then 2022. But these scores have not changed that much. I mean, it went up 3 points, and then like it's going up and down and up and down, but it's staying like basically the same, which I think is less of a like things are getting real bad and more of a things have been real bad for a long time. So also in this article, they're saying that it's widely known that elementary teachers in the U.S. have not been well prepared to teach kids reading in ways that are aligned with scientific evidence-based learning. Which is like, okay, sure, you have said that, but like how? But why have elementary teachers not been equipped to teach them in a scientific method, like, or teach them in a scientific way or in a way that like works? Why would you just say that without backing it up? And then they talked about how Idaho is trying to use evidence-based instruction to improve things. But like, what the heck does that mean, evidence-based instruction? Anyway, so a little ragey. I went over to Reddit because, of course, Reddit is going to be the one where I actually find an answer. And they talked about, this is where I heard, again, the term balanced literacy. So I'm like, why do people keep talking about balanced literacy? What does that mean? So that brought me here. So these pillars are not balanced literacy pillars. They're just the pillars of literacy, not to be confused. So there's a difference between balanced literacy and structured literacy. And this is the one that I think a lot of people are pro. They're in favor of this one. So balanced literacy is basically like using a bunch of different approaches to teach reading. So they're using like pictures and flashcards, they're using sight words, they're using a little bit of phonics, they're using a little bit of like hands-on instructive learning. But the impression that they give you when you're reading about these things, that there isn't really much of like a logic or a pattern or like a reason for why they're doing these things in the particular order they're doing them. They're just like throwing them all at the children and hoping stuff sticks, is the impression they give. Whereas structured literacy is going through these 5 pillars of literacy and doing them one at a time until the student has them down. So you do phonics first and phonics awareness first so the kids can recognize sounds, and then actual phonics, and then you teach them to read. And then after they've learned how to read, then you start teaching them vocabulary. And then once you've got all of these down, then you start trying to teach them how to comprehend what it is they're reading, which is like a direct confrontation to what they were trying to do before, where they were like, if you focus on specific sounds, it's going to detract from the meaning of the book as a whole, and it's going to get rid of the magic out of reading.
Anyways, so this site didn't really seem that trustworthy to me, so I was looking around for more sources, went onto Lexia, and if you've ever spent any time in the classroom, Lexia is it's like a super common app that they use, especially if you are an ESL student to learn English. Lexia is they have an app where you can learn English by reading and doing a lot of stuff in English. So they're in the education world, but I'm going to say they probably have a pretty heavy hand in the financial incentives as well. So they referenced this podcast right here. I haven't listened to it, but there was a couple other sources that mentioned this podcast. Might be worth looking into. So in this article, I didn't really read much about the article, but they were citing sources, and one of the sources they cited was where apparently, but you have to click on the PDF, which is extremely long, but it was saying some very intriguing things, and I was like, whoa, they're making some bold claims. Like this one: most elementary school education and K2 teachers 72% say their schools use balanced literacy, which is what we were just talking about, which is the no one. The one that seems like it doesn't make a lot of sense because they're just throwing things at the students and trying to figure out whatever sticks. They also said this, which shocked me a little bit. The less experience they have in higher education, the more likely post-secondary instructors are to favor explicit systematic phonics with language comprehension as a separate focus. And the more experience they have in the classroom, the more likely elementary teachers are to support balanced literacy. So basically, like, if you have studied education, but you've never actually been in a classroom, you're going to say, this is the way you should learn because this makes sense. But if you've ever been in a classroom teaching students, you're going to say, that does not work. You're full of it. So all of these elementary school teachers who are actually in the classroom every day and are trying the approved scientific methods are saying, what you're saying doesn't work. Like, we're here with the kids. Let me tell you something. Kids do not respond the way you think they respond, is what I'm picking up from this article. I wasn't able to find like where exactly the people they were pulling from to conduct these surveys. They're saying they're serving like lots of teachers, 674 K through second grade teachers, 533 post-secondary instructors. So these are the people who are teaching courses on how to teach students to read, but are not actually in the classrooms teaching students to read, which I feel like should clue us in a little bit on something. If the people doing the work in the classrooms are saying, what you're telling us to do, we tried it and it doesn't work, that's got to account for something, right? In this PDF, they talk about the Fautas and Pinnell level literacy intervention as the program that is most frequently used in elementary schools today. And they're kind of pointing to it as being like, this is the one that's encouraging students to use pictures that illustrate words with predictable sentences so they can kind of guess the words as they're reading. Unless I'm misunderstanding this paragraph. It looks like I might be misunderstanding it, but I'm pressed for time. Hold on, I'll come back to that. Also in this article, I can't remember when, but they point out that there is no single definition of balanced literacy. So basically, structured literacy is like the thing that they want people to do, but balanced literacy is basically just like everything else. So if you're not doing structured literacy, people are just going to call it balanced literacy, which is, I guess it's just a catch-all at this point. It's an abused definition is what I'm trying to say. Okay, coming back to this Lexia article, I'm just going to read this paragraph because I read this and I was like, what the heck? Okay. Lucy Calkins, another champion of balanced literacy, advocates using a workshop model to teach students how to read. Students then demonstrate their skills with minimal direct instruction. Her approach has been criticized for asking students to rely heavily on contextual clues to identify words and their meanings, known as the 3 cueing system, what we talked about before. In 2023, she stepped down from her organization, the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project at Columbia University, amidst criticism that her method downplayed phonics. The organization has since been disbanded, and Calkins now advertises resources that include phonics and decodable books for a private organization she leads. Like, what? Oh, God. Anyways, I'm just going to leave that there. Do with it what you will. Also in this article, is the science of reading better than balanced literacy? Like, can you get any more propaganda-y than this? So the balanced literacy is, like I told you, just a catch-all for anything that is not structured literacy. And they have not been calling it structured literacy. They have rebranded it as the science of reading. So instead of telling people we're using the structured literacy program, they're telling people we're using the science of reading as our teaching methodology. Come on now. Can you say propaganda? Can you say marketing? I think it's probably a better word. Okay, so I wanted to look into the Fountas and Pinnell level literacy intervention that was blamed as being like what Lucy was championing, what they're using to teach balanced literacy. The main thing that they're using to teach balanced literacy, the catch-all. So I was like, what is that? So let's look into it, and I'll tell you what I found, because oh, the drama responding to misinformation about Fountas and Pinnell literacy. Let's look at the facts. Misinformation. This literacy program teaches kids to guess at words, not decode. Misinformation. Fact. These resources teach children to decode using letters and sounds to read words. There's just like, basically, so this is sponsored by Heinemann, which is a book publisher. So they definitely got us money stake in, but they just go through and are like, these resources are not effective. Yes, they are. They're based on the whole language theory of how kids learn to read. No, they're not. And they're basically like, this system that you guys were railing against, you have, like, it's completely wrong. All of the things that you said about it are wrong, which I don't know which is right. I'm just saying there's disagreement here. People don't know what the facts are. People don't even know what the terms are. Everybody be arguing about this stuff without even knowing like what is what. So what does all this have to do with the problems with schools? I don't know. I think it's pretty safe to say schools that have students who can't read is a bad idea, is a problem. But how we fix that is a problem that I don't have an answer for. And for all you haters out there who's saying that I opened a can of worms and dumped it on the table and left it there, you are correct. I have no more time. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.